Thank you for joining today's webinar. Today we're going to go through setting up budgets with spend management to control expenses within the purchasing module. Today we're going to look at setting up budgets, importing budgets, configuring spend management, raising transactions with spend management, and looking at various reports that use budgets. In Sage Intacct, we have budgets as a standard tool, whereas you can import your budgets by GL account and assign to numerous dimensions. These two powerful tools can be used in financial planning and reporting. There are several elements that will need to be considered before you create budgets. You'll need to know what budget it is that you're creating for, reporting periods in the system, frequency of the budget update, number of budgets that you'll be using. And if you're considering using spend management to enforce spending validation against budgets, which requires additional configuration and thought as to how you want to validate your expenses. So we're going to go through all those elements in this session. Prior to creating or importing a budget, we'll need to have a budget in the system, reporting periods, GL accounts, and dimensions set up in the system. I'm firstly going to add the budget that we'll be using in this session. You can get the budget repository page in the general ledger module and the budgets module. So you can either go to the general ledger or budgets repository, or you go to budgets. So I'm going to go to budgets, and in the all tab, we're going to add a budget repository, and we have budget planning, which is a separate system that can be integrated with Sage Intacct. And we're going to look at spend management. So I'm just going to click at the budget repository. And this is the list of all the budget repositories that we have in the system. I'm going to click on add. And the budget ID is year 2024. Budget description is budget for financial year 2024. This is a new budget. Select create new budget. But if you're creating a budget from an existing budget, then you can select the existing budget that you'll be creating it in. And we're not going to select the single currency budget, default budget, and project estimate. This is a new budget, and I'm going to save my budget. Okay, so now that I have my budget repository in the system, so I'll be able to import or create budget details for the year 2024 budget repository. Before I can add the budget details, I'm going to look into the existing reporting periods in this instance. Go back to applications, general ledger, setup, more reporting periods. This is the list of the reporting periods that we have. You can use the existing reporting periods in the system, or you can add the reporting periods to be in line with how you want your reports. We're going to import a budget from month ended March to month ended June. I'm going to verify if the reporting periods that we're going to use has the use for budget checkbox selected. So let's edit month ended March 2024, and the use for budgeting checkbox is selected. And I'm just going to view for April as well. And the use for budget is also checked, meaning that all the reporting periods that's for budget is already checked. Please note that reporting periods used for budgeting cannot overlap. For example, you can't have a budget for month ended July, August, September, and October 2024, and then have a budget for fourth quarter 2024. So meaning that the two will be overlapping. So we cannot have reporting periods used for budgeting that will overlap. Secondly, we're going to go to the general ledger account. I'm going to navigate to applications, general ledger, all general ledger accounts. This is where you'll be adding accounts if you don't have the GL accounts already created or imported in the system. I have my accounts in the system already, so I'm going to use the accounts that are already in the system. There's no need for me to add a new GL account. The general ledger accounts will be used for your budgets, and the statistical accounts can also be included in a budget, which can be defined as for a period or cumulative when they are created. And lastly, before we can import our budgets, I'm going to review the dimensions I have in the system that I can use for my budgets. I'm going to go back to applications, reports, set up, and report setup dimensions. These are all the active dimensions that I have in this system that can be used in my budgets for flexibility and detail in reporting, although it's optional to use dimensions in your budgets, but it's highly recommended. Now we're going to import the budget. Before I can import my budget, I will need to download the template that I'll be using to import the budget. So I'm going to go back to applications, company setup, import data, scroll down to budgets, and you download the template by clicking on template. I've already populated the template that I'll be importing, and this is the template that we'll be importing in this session. So you specify the budget ID, which is year 2024. You add the account numbers. These are the GL account numbers that we'll be importing budgets for. You specify the department ID, the location ID. These are all the dimensions that can be added in your budgets to be able to analyze your data. And we have our periods, month ended March 2024, April, May, and June. We'll be importing budgets for those periods. So you can either import your budgets in the company setup checklist as we have import, or you can import your budgets in the budgets module or the general ledger module. So I'm going to go to budgets, all budget repository, and you can import your budgets in your budget repository page. I'm going to click on import, choose the file, budgets, specify the date format and any other information, and you click on import, and you will get an import success notification which says after the import process completes, and an email will be sent to notify of the status. Now, even though it says import success notification, it doesn't mean that the import was successfully imported. Email will be specific on whether the import was successful or not. It does take a few minutes, so we're just going to wait for a few minutes for the email notification. So as we're waiting for the import notification, we're going to configure spend management. We go to applications, company, admin, subscriptions, scroll down to spend management, click on configure. And in the configure spend management, we have our budget section where you specify which budget you want the spend management to use. So we're going to change this budget to the budget that we just imported, and you're going to select the start budget period, which is month ended March 2024. Scroll down to look for March ended March 2024. There. If a budget has no March, treat budget as 0. I'm not going to check this box. And we have the notification section where the budget admin will get an over budget notification. I'm going to select the checkbox. This is the email that I received from Intacct on the status of my import. It reads your recent GL budget import from the file budget W, which is the file that I imported, was successful, meaning that the import that I just processed was successful, and now we're going to verify that in the system. But before we can verify that, we will continue configuring spend management. You specify the budget administrator and the notification presence. So days is fine. And because spend management is a validation tool, which validates your expenses, in the validation section, you select the dimensions that you want to be validated. The dimensions selected is department and location. I'm going to leave it as is. You can specify if you want to skip validation. You can select entities that you want to skip validations in. And in the duration section, the default duration is current year through current month. That is fine. Applications that you want validation in, the checkbox to validate the purchasing transaction is selected. You specify what you want the system to do when the budget is exceeded between stop and warn. The accounts payable module validation is also selected. Warn if the budget is exceeded, and in the general ledger module is also selected for validation to warn whenever the budget is exceeded. And account group is management. That is fine. And in the committed expenses, you can select whether you want spend management to be included in committed expenses. And in the purchasing section, you select the purchasing transactions that you want spend management in. So I already have the purchase order, the insertion order, purchase order with spend management, and vendor invoice with spend management, all created in top level. So we have the spend management in these transaction definitions. And lastly, going to the item GL group. The default item GL group is repairs and maintenance. We have the marketing and professional fees item GL groups that we have spend management for. And I'm going to add more item GL group, which is travel, meals and entertainment, and rent. Travel, meals and entertainment, rent. Save your changes. So the spend management module is configured. We're going to verify or review the budget details that we just imported. We go to applications, budgets, budget repository, and go to budget details for the budget year 2024. And this is what I've imported. Now I have my budgets in the system, and we've completed the spend management configurations. I'm going to manifest the power of both the tools to manage your company's expenses. I'm going to raise the purchase order spend management as configured to have spend management on PO transaction definitions. Go to applications, purchasing, all. In the transaction order, click on the plus sign just next to purchase order with spend management. Select the date and the supplier. I'm not going to add any reference, any message. No attachment needed for this example, and the base currency is ZAR. The transaction currency is ZAR, and I'm going to continue and enter my entries. I have the show spend insight on transactions that has spend management. This is not on all the transactions. Like transactions that do not have spend management do not have show spend insight. So with the show spend insight, all users that enter, review, or approve transactions can use spend insight to see how the transaction impacts the budget before the transaction is posted, helping users to make informed decisions during a spend process. I'm going to select the item ID, choose travel, meals and entertainment, and rents. The location is 700 and I rent 500. And going to select the department. So for travels, this is for marketing, meals, services. The rent is admin. And quantity is 1, and the price for these items. So for this purchase order, travel was 1,000 Rand, meals were 2,000, rent was 850. So I'm just going to change the date to March because my budget is for March. So once I have included all my entries, I can click on Show Spend Insight. And on my Spend Insight, I have the department, the location, the GL account, the budget for those GL accounts, the actual committed expenditure, and this purchase. So my budget is 1,000 and for this purchase is 1,000. So funds available is 0, meaning that the moment I raise another transaction for travels, a notification will be sent to the budget administrator. And for meals, I have a budget of 1,800. This purchase is 2,000 and over budget with 200 and 300 United Kingdom, the rent, the location. It's not showing me the budget for the United Kingdom rent. This is very helpful when it comes to managing your expenses. So if I'm going to go through with posting this transaction, I should expect a notification for the funds available. I'm just going to remove the rent transaction line and I'm going to go ahead and post this transaction. And I get a warning. So when I post this transaction, I get a warning that states this transaction exceeds the budget limit. Reduce the transaction amount or work with your budget administrator to address your overages. But you can still choose to ignore the warning and the transaction will go through. So when you get this warning, depending on how your company works, the user will then know whether to continue posting this transaction or to just leave it and contact the budget administrator. But I'm going to post it and I have my transaction posted. I'm going to quickly view the transaction and I have access to the Spend Insight even when I'm just viewing the transaction. Now we're going to look into the reports that we have that includes budgets. Go to Applications, Reports, All Report Center. These are my reports. I'm just going to look for the actual versus budget report. I have the profit and loss, actual versus budget. And these are the financial reports that I have. I'm going to run the expenditure, budget versus actual and commits report. And because of the periods specified in this report, I have the total budget, the actual commitment, and the remaining budget for professional fees and expenses. Okay. This is an example of a report that you can get within Intacct. I'm going to look for another report, profit and loss. And I have actual budgets, the difference, and the variances. And these are all the examples of the reports that you can create, modify to be able to analyze your financial data. With the budgets that you add in the system, it can be included in your reports. These are examples of reports that you can run with budgets. And that is how you would use budgets and spend management in Sage Intacct.